The question is that this House do now adjourn. Oliver Ryan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I greatly appreciate this opportunity to engage in a significant debate concerning the implementation of the LGBT Veterans Independent Review. This review not only acknowledges the historical injustices faced by our LGBT veterans, but also brings to light the ongoing barriers, insecurities and inequalities they experience, underscoring the urgent need for reform, support and compensation. There's been plenty of interest in this debate, and I'm pleased to see members for Redcar, West Ham and Beckton, Slough, Macclesfield, Brighton, Kemptown and Peacehaven, Wellington and others in the room. May I start by congratulating the honourable and gallant member for Birmingham Selly on his appointment to ministerial office. We are indeed fortunate to have someone of his experience and dedication leading the way in advocating for all veterans and their families. His role is pivotal, and his leadership will undoubtedly influence the lives of countless veterans for the better. Minister, thank you. This time of year, we come together to honour the profound sacrifices made in times of conflict, and to remember those who gave their lives so we could live ours in peace. So, it is right to have this debate about those veterans historic governments have let down. Not because, as some would assert, talking about diversity, inclusivity and lived experience makes our armed forces weaker, but because in fact it makes them stronger. The gay ban, which was active from 1967 to 2000, was an abhorrent period of our history. For over 3 decades, discriminatory practices, policies excluded LGBT individuals. These policies created a culture of fear and discrimination, where people were compelled to hide who they were, deny who they were, or risk losing everything. To treat those who were actively serving our country in this way, often putting themselves in harm's way, is a shameful chapter of our country's history. It undermines the values we hold so close of respect, honour, duty, freedom and inclusion. So especially as a gay man, to whom this period feels somewhat alien when we consider the freedoms that we enjoy today, it's quite sickening to reflect upon this legacy, and we must ensure it never happens again. Of course.
I thank my honourable friend, the member for Burnley, for securing today's debate on LGBT veterans, because, as he's rightly mentioned, whilst the damage of the ban on LGBT personnel serving from 1967 to 2000 and their abhorrent treatment cannot be undone, the restorative measures contained within the independent review remain hugely important. Does he agree with me that it is incredibly important that to ensure justice, steps should be taken to create greater awareness of these measures and that they need to be implemented forthwith?
Absolutely. I thank my honourable friend, the member for Slough, and the chair of the Defence Select Committee. It's good to see him in his place. He's completely right about the recommendations made as part of the review, and I'll come on to that shortly. I would like to pay particular tribute now to Fighting with Pride, an LGBT veterans charity, for the quite amazing work that they're doing in advocating, supporting the health and well-being of LGBT veterans, service personnel and their families. I've met with Craig Jones, Carl Austin Bean, and their strength and work in this area has been invaluable to many. They make the important point more eloquently than I do, that this is about security. This is about the historic injustice of lives ruined by prison sentences, criminal records, being labelled as sex offenders, and the shame that that brings. Indeed, Craig highlighted 2 particular cases to me of Stephen, a man imprisoned in Germany while serving during the 1980s for his sexuality, and David, a Gulf War veteran, imprisoned and registered as a sex offender in the mid-90s, just months before I was born. This stuff isn't ancient history. Lord Etherton's review makes stark the terrible experiences that so many LGBTQ veterans had to endure. His report bears out the painful reality of being forcibly removed from the armed forces, the harassment these people faced, and the acute losses that such discrimination led to. As one particularly poignant veteran said, "My ejection from the army made me homeless. My mother disowned me for bringing shame to the family. I ended up living in my car with an unhealthy relationship with alcohol until I got my life back together. It took years." And this summarises the deep emotional scars that have been left by a system that failed in its duty to protect those who served. Indeed, my own constituent, Stephen, to whom I have to say I wouldn't be raising this without his lobbying of me through the campaign and since becoming an MP. Not a gay man, but was dismissed on the suspicion of his sexuality. A life in tatters, living in shame and anguish for years, and a relationship broken with his family because of the decision that was taken about him. The review's findings are both alarming and revealing, highlighting that even after the repeal of the ban, LGBT veterans continue to face discrimination and stigma. Many still face significant barriers in accessing the full range of benefits and services they deserve, underscoring how unwelcoming the culture can be for LGBT service members. It's so unacceptable. It isn't what we want for Britain, and it can't be what our forces is about, and I know the Minister agrees.
Yeah. Well, my honourable friend, give way.
Of course.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. It is 30 years this year since I started getting involved in campaigning on LGBT issues. It is not as ancient history for me as it is for him. He is a younger colleague than myself. I got that in before he did. I was speaking to a veteran last night. He has mentioned how this is still affecting people. The world has changed significantly from those days when I started campaigning, in which people were still being criminalised and convicted, as he said. But it is still a live issue for many people. And there is concern amongst those campaigners that many of those veterans are now getting older and time is running out for many of them to be able to resolve this.
Yeah. Absolutely, I thank my honourable friend for that contribution and for his experience. And it kind of comes as a bit of a reality check that, especially as gay men, we stand on the shoulders of giants in this space, of people that have come before us that have lived much more difficult lives and faced an awful lot more discrimination than we currently face. So the duty is kind of on us to raise these points as we're here. The report pointed out in several aspects, touching on the mental health difficulties in particular faced by LGBT veterans, in essence, against the special nature of experiences and traumas that they were exposed to. They reported higher rates of suicide, of homelessness, mental health issues, which included but were not limited to symptoms of PTSD and depression. That's why focus on targeted services is really important to adjust to their needs. Access to healthcare and support services was an additional concern raised by the review. Many LGBT veterans report difficulties in navigating the support system and too often felt that their identities and experiences are not understood or respected even in the present day. For these veterans, the lack of sensitivity and awareness within the system meant a significant obstacle to receiving the care and support they deserve. It's essential that our systems cultivate an environment of understanding and respect going forward, one that acknowledges the distinct experience of LGBT veterans within the wider veteran support network. The creation of dedicated support schemes tailored to the needs of LGBT veterans is another critical recommendation. These programmes should include peer-to-peer support, mental health resources and other services that acknowledge and validate the unique experiences of LGBT veterans. Peer support in particular can be an invaluable resource, offering veterans a safe space to share their experiences, build connections and receive encouragement from others who understand their journey. Increased outreach efforts are also essential to ensure that LGBT veterans are aware of the services available to them. For too long, many of these veterans have felt marginalised and disconnected from the resources intended to support them. We've got to link those people up. Targeted communication strategies are needed to engage this community effectively, ensuring they know their rights and the resources that are at their disposal. By proactively reaching out to LGBT veterans, we can foster a sense of belonging to ensure they receive the support that they need. Financial redress stands out as a key recommendation in Lord Everton's review, underscoring the need to compensate those affected by these historic wrongs. Although the previous government offered a formal apology and took meaningful steps to implement many of the review's recommendations, the allocated £50 million compensation scheme fund falls short, inadequately compensating the estimated 4,000 LGBT veterans and those affected by discriminatory practices. This amount is insufficient to address the depth of the harm inflicted or the number of people whose lives have been trashed in many cases. We must advocate for a more substantial commitment to financial redress, one that reflects the true scale of injustice endured by these individuals and that seeks to make amends in a meaningful way. I know the Minister is genuinely alive to this. He is listening and he and the Defence Secretary understand the plight of this community, and I thank him for his continuing work in this area to support our veterans, especially as a man of service himself. The Independent LGBT Veteran Review provides a comprehensive roadmap for addressing the inequalities faced by LGBT veterans. By recognising the ongoing challenges, we can take decisive steps to implement the report's recommendations. We can work towards creating a military and veteran support system that truly honours service of all individuals, regardless of their sexual orientation or gender identity. This commitment to inclusivity and justice is not only a moral imperative, but also a testament to the values we strive to uphold as a nation. Values which I know the Minister and the Government agree with. To conclude, let's take this opportunity to ensure that the sacrifices of all of our veterans are acknowledged and respected. Let us all work together to build a future in which every service member is afforded the dignity and support they deserve, free from the shadow of discrimination. This is our chance to demonstrate our commitment to justice, to extend a hand to those we have wronged, including the review of financial redress, and to create a legacy of equality and respect within our armed forces today and for the future. Thank you.
I call Gideon Amos.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to congratulate the Honourable Member for Burnley for bringing this debate and securing time for it. It's an excellent move. I'd also like to thank the Minister and you, Madam Deputy Speaker, for allowing me to speak in a somewhat short notice request. So thank you for that. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm confident and I hope and I'm confident the House will come together today to recognise the service of many of our armed forces who were shockingly discriminated against and dismissed for nothing more than being who they are. And on these benches, I'm sure on many others, but in the Liberal Party Constitution and the Liberal Democrat Constitution is the belief that everyone should be free from poverty, ignorance and conformity. And it's in that spirit that we, on these benches, would add our support to the recommendations of the Atherton Review. It's really, and also I'd like to add our support and thanks to the work of organisations already listed campaigning for the rights of these people. 5 minutes from my house, Madam Deputy Speaker, is the RAF Cadets base, which I see on the way to the Army Cadet Force, where I'm an adult instructor. And I confess, coming into the chamber and thanking the Minister, I'm not sure whether I should be saluting or bowing to the I'm only a sergeant, you see, bowing to the, or saluting or bowing to, which one I should be doing. But what I did want to say is that Mark Shepherd in my constituency used to be a member of the RAF Cadets in Taunton in my constituency, and later went on to pursue the career that he wanted to have in the RAF as a technician. He went on and saw active service on the front line and with tornadoes in Kuwait, in the Second Kuwait War, and in Kosovo. But he was then presented by questioning of his sexuality, presented with the option of either retiring immediately, being immediate dismissal, or from which he would have lost £6,000, which obviously is a considerable sum of money when you're a young man and at that stage in life. Or the alternative he was offered was the premature dismissal route, premature retirement route, which he had to take, which meant he had to stay within the service much longer in very difficult circumstances with a cloud hanging over him, where really all that should have hung over him was our nation's gratitude for serving our country in the front line and putting his life on the line. I'm delighted to see this issue has come to the fore. I genuinely congratulate the member for Burnley for bringing this forward. I'm absolutely delighted that, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'll be presenting Mark with his certificate from the RAF in a few weeks in Taunton to recognise the injustice that was done to him, and it's my absolute privilege to have the opportunity to do that and to explain and pay tribute to his service in this debate. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
I call Chris Ward.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the member for securing this very welcome debate today, and the Veterans Minister for the collegiate and sympathetic way he's engaged with me and other colleagues across the House over recent weeks. Madam Deputy Speaker, I represent a constituency, Brighton, Kemptown and Peacehaven, that has a significant number of LGBT veterans, some of whom I've had the huge honour of meeting in recent weeks. I've also been fortunate enough to work with Fighting with Pride, the same organisation my honourable friend referred to earlier, and I'm pleased to say join us in the public gallery today. And Madam Deputy Speaker, let me be clear about the injustice that has been suffered here, because as the Atherton Review sets out, for over 4 decades, considerable time, resource and effort was put into hunting down people suspected of being gay in the armed forces. This led, amongst other things, to arrest, interrogation, demeaning physical inspections and medical treatments, court-martial, imprisonment, and being dismissed in disgrace. As we've already heard, this left many veterans, often at a young age, with criminal records, no jobs, income, or family support. And in the short time I have, I just want to highlight one case, a constituent of mine who I met last week. Steve joined the RAF in 1971 at the age of 16. He worked on Vulcan bombers at RAF Waddington, served 3 tours in the Falklands. He was stationed in West Germany. He had an impeccable service record. In 1985, he was investigated by the RAF over a relationship with a male officer. He made the fatal mistake of telling the truth and was sentenced to 6 months in jail. He lost his rank, he lost all his financial benefits, he lost his family, and he lost the career he loved. When he was released, he was 28 years old, homeless, and with nowhere to turn. Madam Deputy Speaker, I've met Steve. He's a man of huge honour and courage. But these are the words he said to me. I felt washed in shame. My career was shattered. I had a criminal record. I had no pension, and I had to live hand to mouth for the rest of my life, surviving on benefits. Now, I raise Steve's case not because it's unique. In fact, as we've heard today, it's not even an outlier. It's sadly typical of the story of too many LGBT veterans. Loss of earnings, loss of dignity, and loss of purpose. Not over a short term, but over a lifetime. And that's why I gently say to the Minister, who I say has been incredibly sympathetic, and while I also recognise the financial situation this government operates under, can capping payments at an average of around £12,500 per person really be appropriate for the level of injustice suffered by people like Steve and so many other LGBT veterans? Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Defence Secretary, who I have enormous respect for, said when the Etherton report was published, this is unfinished business for Labour. I agree, and I know the Veterans Minister will want to complete that work and finally deliver the justice LGBT veterans have been waiting for far too long. Thank you.
Well, Tim Roca.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I start by thanking my honourable friend for Burnley for securing this debate. He's proving himself to be a powerful advocate for his constituency. Can I also welcome the Minister, the honourable and gallant member, to his place and thank him for all the work he does. He's a credit to the government. And finally, can I thank you for your indulgence in allowing me to speak this afternoon as well, Madam Deputy Speaker. But the very fact that we have to have this debate is a reminder that there once was a time when your ability to serve was questioned because of the person you loved. Discrimination against any LGBT person is, of course, appalling, but it takes a special kind of cynicism and bigotry to punish, denigrate and demean volunteer servicemen and women because of their sexuality. Soldiers who served willingly, who fought beside their peers willingly, and in some cases who died or were injured in the line of duty. There was never any excuse for the laws being what they were, no justification on the account of ability in combat, no rationale on the basis of individual discipline, no standards these servicemen and women could not and did not reach. These laws existed simply out of a fear of difference and an intolerance of LGBT people. It was inexcusable. I think as well it is worth reflecting on the sad truth that this used to be a consensus. In 1996, a cross-party select committee rejected calls, shamefully, for the removal of the ban. That is quite recent. But it is important to note that 30 years on, there is a new consensus. And where before brave individuals like the Naval Officer Duncan Lustig-Prien, RAF Sergeant Graham Grady, RAF Nurse Jeanette Smith and Navy Weapons Engineer John Beckett had to stand alone, now this place is united in condemnation of that policy and supports the thousands of LGBT soldiers, sailors and airmen in our armed forces, alongside the phenomenal charities that have already been referenced, such as Fighting with Pride. I'm pleased to say that a member of my new team here in Parliament is an Army reservist and has seen in his own military career an improvement in attitudes towards himself and other LGBT plus colleagues. It's a journey, but it is worth acknowledging that things are improving and getting better. Instead of seeing difference as a threat and a source of disruption, difference is seen as an advantage. Celebrating difference, diversity of thought, avoiding groupthink, fostering a thinking soldier environment are parts of a wider conceptual component that gives our military an edge. And it's simply not enough to say that we tolerate LGBT people in our military or our society, but that we value their unique contribution to our forces and what they can bring. But even as we are far beyond the ban of the 90s, we need to support those that we let down. I am worried, as other honourable members are, that a cap was placed on the compensation scheme for the 4,000 veterans that lost their careers because of institutional bigotry by the British state. And I agree with my honourable friend, how can it be right that £12,400 can be deemed sufficient for your own chaplain initiating an investigation and subsequent interrogation by the Special Investigation Branch? In exchange for their willingness to serve, the British state treated many thousands of people with contempt, exposed them to state-sanctioned, institutionalised homophobia and discharge, leaving them isolated from their friends and family. I am glad we are building a new consensus, but let's go a step further with that consensus and make sure that those 4,000 brave, selfless servicemen and women get the compensation and redress that they deserve. And they're only the ones that we know about. How many more managed by hiding their true selves? How many more denied their true self to themselves? We must do right by these people. Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, as we approach Remembrance Day, I hope we can all add to our reflections a moment for LGBT veterans specifically. And I will be thinking of Edward Britton. Edward was born in Macclesfield, my constituency. At 21, as a temporary lieutenant in the Sherwood Foresters, Edward fought in the Battle of the Somme. He was injured twice, shot in the arm and then in the right thigh on the 1st of June 1916. His gallantry won him the Military Cross, just like the Minister. And Edward's citation was precise and understated. For conspicuous gallantry and leadership during an attack, he was severely wounded but continued to lead his men with great bravery and coolness until a second wound disabled him. Returning to the front, he was tipped off by his CO that he would face a court-martial when he came out of the line, as army censors had read in his personal correspondence that he'd had an intimate relationship with a man in his company. On the 15th of June 1918, as Edward led his company in a counter-attack on the Assaggio Plateau, recapturing a trench and stopping an enemy advance, he was shot and killed by an enemy sniper. He was 22 years old. Now, whether or not he deliberately put himself in a position to be killed, as his sister and CO believe, is unknowable. But what is knowable is that from the 15th of June 1918 all the way to the 12th of January 2000, had Edward come out of the line alive after that attack, he would have been court-martialed and shamed by the country he had shed blood for. He had a military cross, he was shot twice at the Somme, he returned to the front and led his men with bravery, but none of that mattered. He would have been considered a disruption to the unit. So let me be the first person in this place to thank Captain Edward Britton, MC, for his service. He deserved better of his country. Thank you, Madam.
Minister Carns.
Thank you, Deputy Madam Speaker. And I'm grateful to the Honourable Friend, the Member of Burnley, for initiating this debate. Also from the Honourable Member from Taunton and Wellington for supporting this case, but also his fantastic support to the cadets, which is absolutely super. And obviously the Honourable Member from Brighton, Kemptown and Peacehaven for the harrowing story that's all too familiar across the system. And for that really moving story at the end from the Honourable Member from Macclesfield, which really resonates with what we're about to discuss today. Earlier this month, I had the privilege of speaking at the LGBTQ+ Defence Awards, where I thanked former and serving personnel for their tenacity and indeed their courage. And I mentioned that anyone can dodge bullets, bombs or artillery fire, but to fight against the tide when everything is bearing down on you and continue the struggle and the fight for justice is commendable. A wise man once said to me that courage is a decision, it's not a reaction. And those in fighting for pride, and the others who have championed this cause for so long, are truly courageous. I indeed think they're the bravest of the brave. Indeed, the abhorrent way LGBT service personnel were treated from 1967 to the year 2000 by the Ministry of Defence was completely unacceptable. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Ministry was on the wrong side of history. Its historic policy of prohibiting homosexuality in the armed forces was simply wrong. And that's why the LGBT Veterans Independent Review, conducted by Lord Etherton, has been a matter that has united this chamber since its report came out in July last year. And this government supported the review in opposition and is now it's supporting in its delivery. And I trust colleagues appreciate the importance of this remaining a cross-party issue as we address the remaining recommendations. I would at this point like to personally thank Lord Etherton for all the thoughtful work he's done to address these long-burning injustices, and I'm pleased that 33 of the 49 recommendations have indeed been implemented. And I can confirm that through the gov.uk front door page, we've already had 676 applications for non-financial restorative measures have been received. In practice, this means apology letters have been sent directly to the individuals affected by these issues from the Chief of the Army, the Royal Navy and the Royal Air Force. Medals and berries that should never have been taken away have been reissued. And each of the services has hosted several presentation ceremonies to welcome LGBT veterans back into the service family, where they've always belonged. And rightly, our focus is now on fully addressing the 16 outstanding recommendations, including the 2 that relate to financial redress for those dismissed and discharged as a result of the ban. And so I very much welcome this opportunity to hear the views of the Honourable and Right Honourable members today, which will help inform the Government's work to design an appropriate financial redress scheme, which will enable applications to be considered on a case-by-case basis and timely payments to be made. I can reassure veterans and the whole LGBT community that the needs of the potential claimants are being carefully considered at each stage, and including the need to include a fast lane for applicants in certain circumstances, especially those with terminal illnesses. I have, of course, been aware of speculation and have heard some figures in relation to this fund, and I trust colleagues will understand that as we continue our work to finalise its modalities, it's too soon for me to comment on exact figures. However, the Government is fully committed to meeting our inherent target of opening the application window by the end of 2024, with it remaining open for 2 years.
Will the Minister give way on that point?
I will.
I thank the Minister for giving way, and I'm not sure if it's a particular procedure to try and give way in your own debate, but I appreciate his time. I thank the Minister for his comments about the compensation scheme. I know he's doing the work, and I know that sincerely he understands this scenario of these people. It would be remiss of me not to mention, particularly on behalf of Stephen, my constituent, who felt yesterday's budget was great in lots of ways, particularly around infected blood and the post office scandal, but wanted to see a compensation scheme to deal with this in the same way. I hope that he will look on that and make sure that it's not another year for the budget until we can come to a place where we can talk about this in a sort of financial sustainability situation, and he'll recognise the context that Stephen references.
First of all, thank the Honourable Member for his intervention, and sort of linking to the Brighton and Kemptown and Peacehaven. I'm aware of the recent speculations around the potential size of any fund and indeed the individual redress payments. It's not possible to have certainty about the number of applicants at the moment. It's also premature to estimate the size of the individual payments awards, but we are working to make sure the broadest amount of individuals receive payments, because we do acknowledge that those dismissed and discharged, there were also many that weren't dismissed and discharged who were also impacted by the ban. But in relation to the other 16 outstanding recommendations, 6 are for defence and the Office for Veterans Affairs to implement, including the delivery of the memorial at the National Arboretum, which I had the pleasure of visiting just last week. We're progressing these with the expertise of the excellent staff from Fighting with Pride who are here today. 10 of the outstanding recommendations are for the National Health Service to address, much as was mentioned by the Honourable Member, and my team are in touch with the colleagues in Department of Health and Social Care to track that process. It's also worth mentioning and highlighted by the Honourable Member of Burnley. It is tragic and an all too familiar case of the harrowing stories that we hear about this ban. The Defence Secretary and I have sat down with a number of veterans affected by the ban itself, and I've heard about the different and profound ways it has harmed people's lives. And that's why I'm determined that the Government shall address all the outstanding recommendations.
Will the Minister give way?
I will.
thank the Honourable Minister for giving way. One of the reasons we are in this position, having made so much progress, is under the last Labour government we made a lot of legal changes, but we also worked to make societal changes, working with progressive colleagues from other parties too. There is a lot of hope from the community with the new government that we can pick up that baton and make that progress again. So I'm pleased to hear that the measure is saying. Does he agree with me that resolving these issues quickly would send that message to the LGBT community that we are taking that seriously and keen to get on with making progress on equality again?
Thank you for the Honourable Member for that intervention. I absolutely agree. The quicker we get this done and get the due justice delivered is absolutely where we want to go. Madam Deputy Speaker, when I joined the Royal Marines in 1999, the shameful ban on homosexuality in the armed forces was still in place. Last month, the Defence Secretary and I presented Etherton ribbons to Emma Riley, Stephen Close and Carl Austin Behan. This ribbon represents the commitment and sacrifices made in service by LGBT veterans, the suffering caused by the cruel ban and the strength shown by those who stood against it. It's one of the numerous steps this government is taking to ensure the armed forces are tolerant and welcoming to all. Our LGBT plus networks are helping us improve the experience of service personnel and civilian staff. And I urge everyone affected by past failings to register interest in restorative measures by visiting the LGBT Veteran Support page on gov.uk. The Defence Secretary and I will drive hard to get this work done until every recommendation of Lord Etherton's review is absolutely implemented. To right the wrongs of the past and to ensure every veteran who has helped keep Britain secure receives the respect and support they deserve. Thank you, Deputy Member Speaker.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. Order, order.